Hello, my name is Kiana, and today I'll be doing my presentation on the civil rights movement in America in the 1950s and the 1960s. So, the civil rights movement in the 1950s and the 1960s was a struggle for African Americans to achieve equal rights under the law and racial discrimination. And so, some of the key points that we'll be discussing in this presentation will include some background information, some of the strengths, limitations, leaders, key events, key points, and some key policies that kind of changed our world and helped shape our world that we live in today. The civil rights movement and The civil rights movement in the U.S. was a struggle during the 1950s and 60s to end racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans. Its roots go back to the end of slavery in 1865 and the failure of Reconstruction, which allowed Southern states to enforce racial Jim Crow laws for decades during the 20th century. Especially after both World Wars, African Americans increasingly demanded equal rights, with legal and grassroots efforts gaining momentum. And also, I wanted to talk about the civil rights movement gained national attention in the 1950s with key events like the Montgomery bus boycott and the murder of Emmett Till, which shocked the nation. Organizations such as the NAACP and leaders like Dr. Martin King played a major role in organizing protests and legal battles. These efforts led to major achievements, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed segregation and protected voting rights for African Americans. So some of the strengths that I wanted to talk about would be the policies, impact, and benefits. The civil rights movement led to significant policy changes that reshaped American society. Key legislations like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 aimed to end racial segregation, combat discrimination, and ensure equal access to voting. These policies had and continue to have major social, economic, and political benefits. Another strength would be the increased education and employment opportunities that African American now had a chance to experience. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination in public places, employment, and education. Anti discrimination laws allow more African Americans to access better job housing and education, which helped thousands of African Americans at this time. I mean, before this, African Americans were struggling. They were in a horrible place. Although they weren't in like a much better place, the opportunity to have access to better education and employment opportunities, it bettered them. It was the start of something to help them. And lastly, the social and cultural shifts. The civil rights movement changed national attitudes about race and equality. It kind of laid the groundwork for future movements advocating for women rights, the LGBTQ community rights, and immigration reform. And we know about these things today because it's happening. So some of the limitations would be persistent racial economic gaps, incomplete education equity, housing discrimination and segregation, intersectional inequalities and equities, and areas of growth. So, kind of to talk about the areas for growth moment, while although the civil rights movement made historic progress, several areas still needed improvement. Voting rights protection must be restored, and criminal justice reform is needed to reduce racial disparities. Education funding should be more equitable, and policies must help close the racial wealth gap through better access to job and housing. Civil rights laws also need to address intersectional discrimination to protect people facing multiple forms of inequality. So here are some of the famous civil rights leaders around this time that kind of sparked this movement. We have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who's known for his "I Have a Dream" speech. We have Rosa Parks, who's known for not giving up her seat for a white man on a bus. Um, and we have Malcolm X, he had a major impact on African Americans during this time. He was kind of like the definition for Black empowerment and justice, and he promoted Black self reliance. And he was also a key figure in the Nation of Islam. So these are the two main key events that I want to talk on. There are also more, but I feel like these are the best ones that really give you a picture and the significance of the civil rights movements. We have the Montgomery bus boycott, which was between 1955 and 1956. Like I said, this was sparked by Rosa Parks, and she was arrested for refusing to give up a seat to a white passenger in Montgomery, Alabama. Led by Dr. Martin Luther King, the boycott lasted over a year and ended with a Supreme Court ruling that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. And we also have the famous March on Washington for Jobs and Freedoms for African Americans, and this took place in the 1963. And this happened in Washington D.C. and over 250,000 people participated in the speech. So some key points in timeline would be Brown versus Board of Education that occurred in 1954, the murder of Emmett Till, the Montgomery bus boycott, which began in 1955. We have the Little Rock Nine, which began in 1957. We have the SNCC form, which was in the 1960s. We have the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing that happened in the 1963, and fam- and we also had the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. So some of the major civil rights policy that I thought that you guys should know that are like the important ones for me is the Brown versus Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the Civil Rights Act of 1960, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And all of these policies helped shape our world today. Without some of these policies, African Americans would be significantly behind. And so here are my references that I got all my information from and my data. And thank you.